Okay, so like past weeks, we're going to go ahead and get started with our reflection question from the week. So if you guys would go ahead and post in the chat what content across the course has been the most useful while providing feedback. And David's put the question in the chat for you guys so you can respond to it.
And if you haven't had lots of opportunities to give feedback, you could also just think about what's been most useful for your own task design or your own thinking. But now that we've been here for, I mean, we're in week 6 now, so we've had good span of time together, just kind of reflecting across the different things we've done, thinking about what's been really useful for you.
You guys are welcome to respond to each other in the chat, or you can go ahead and unmute your mics. Anything you see that just kind of jumps out at you or speaks to you. All right, some great stuff in there. So any thoughts about anything that's been posted?
I would agree with Sonia. The reading and writing standards have helped me in social studies just to help raise the rigor of our content standards. So they're not just waiting on me to give them a piece of information or reading from a textbook. They're actually becoming the experts themselves on a certain content standard along the way. And I think that's a piece that was missing from my instruction that I wouldn't have had without LDC. So I'm grateful for it.
Yay, thank you for sharing that. Anyone else? All right, so we're in for a treat tonight. We're going to continue with our task workshopping like we did last week, but this time we're going to go into breakout rooms and just look at a couple of different tasks. And like always, we're going to have our documents that will help guide us along the way. And we're going to be looking at the task workshopping document. We'll also provide some questions to guide us in our thinking. Do we want to start breakout rooms yet, or?
Almost time. So before we do that, David's going to just get us all set up with everything that we need for the workshopping.
So I'm going to share a few things with you guys. One, I'm going to share some links in the chat, some documents that we can have open as we get prepared to go into breakout rooms. So I'm going to actually share my screen to show you some of those documents that we can kind of get there together. So one really useful document, and again, all these links are in the chat, is to have that workshop protocol. And we're going to have breakout rooms where we will workshop the tasks together. But this is a really nice kind of a guideline, because we'll go through this. We'll read the task again. We'll ask the task author to go ahead and kind of give us that overview about what they're trying to accomplish. And those steps, like we did last week, we're just going to do it again this week. So thanks for Seth for being a guinea pig last week and kind of going through it with us. This week we'll have a chance to do some more tasks in our breakout rooms. So that's the protocol. Other good document is to have our Common Core, our standards, that booklet, and again, it goes for each reading standard, and it's nice because it breaks it down by grade level and subject. So we can really think about those reading standards, like we mentioned just a few minutes ago, those reading standards and how they work with the content standards. One, I'm just going to give a shout out to one of my favorites, is the task templates, because this is where it's a really good document to use if we're trying to play with the templates and get kind of a concrete idea of what the thinking work is that we want from students. So those task templates we'll take a look at, and we'll kind of play around with some of those as options. Again, that pitfall checklist, like we know and love, and I know that some people have called this out in the chat already this evening, but really thinking about what are some common pitfalls that we make as we develop tasks. So we'll be kind of critical friends. We'll think about these. So again, another great document to refer to. The last one is that curriculum alignment rubric. And so this is coming from that peer review, like we've been talking about from National Peer Review, of how we can look at this task from kind of a different lens, but all of the different criteria that we need to think about when we're building a module. So those are our documents that we're going to be using in conjunction for the breakout room. So Nicole's actually going to help send us into our breakout rooms, and we should be able to get to 2 different tasks tonight. We kind of, asked Amanda to volunteer on one of the rooms, but we had that sign up that everyone could contribute to, so we should get to 2 tasks tonight. If not, there's always an opportunity to do one-on-ones. And Norris, Nicole, and I, we have a sign-up sheet where you can actually meet with us. We can do Zoom, we can do it face-to-face, but we'll have a chance to do one-on-ones for some more time. But tonight we're just gonna get some practice, kind of getting the rhythm or getting the feel down for doing workshopping. So without further ado, Nicole's gonna send us into breakout rooms, but we just wanna make sure we have all those documents open in our tabs, and then we'll see you on the other side.
Perfect. Thank you, David. Yeah, so just to reiterate something that David just said that's really important. I know that these task workshops are really short during the sessions here together, but they're really designed, as David said, to get you familiar with that process, that way of thinking and collaborating with one another, as well as just to generate ideas from all the great perspectives of colleagues in this group setting. And then we have found that in combination with a focused one-on-one session with one of us, the balance of those 2 modes of getting feedback and making decisions about your task really helps move it along and get it ready for that submission to national peer review. So we'll share the sign-up sheet for those one-on-ones at the end of the session tonight, but we are going to spend really the entire session in our breakout rooms, in nice small tight groups doing these task workshops together. We'll come back for about 10 minutes at the end just to reflect and share that sign up sheet for one-on-ones, but we're really just going to spend our time focusing on the tasks tonight. So I want to thank everybody who went last week to get us started on that process. There's always a vulnerability in sharing your work, but I think everybody left feeling the power of that collaboration. So also thank you to everybody who's bringing their tasks tonight for us to look at. So I am going to send you into breakout rooms. You should see an invitation pop up on your screen to join one of the breakout rooms. You just have to accept it. And then I'll broadcast a message to everybody, about 2 or 3 minutes before we're going to come all back together. But this will actually give us a really solid, between 15 and 20 minutes for each task that we're going to do. So you can kind of pace yourself accordingly. Any clarifying questions before we move into breakout rooms? Hey guys.
Hey.
Hi.
All right,
Hey
so you
there.
may have guessed we're in the science breakout room.
All right.
It's going to be all science all day. So really excited to look at Anna's task and Sonia's task. And we do have the luxury of a little bit of time to really dig in. So I thought, Anna, maybe we would start with yours if you are comfortable with that.
Sure.
And then, so that'll take us right to about 7 o'clock. And then we will transition over to yours, Sonia. How does that sound?
Okay.
Okay. So I'm going to share my screen, but also here is the link to Anna's task in our collection so that you can hop in there. And we are going to, just like last week, use the steps of the task workshopping protocol. We'll start by reading the task out loud, hear a little bit from Anna about what she's hoping to accomplish with this task for students. Then we'll begin by really analyzing alignment to standards, and then from there we'll go where the conversation takes us. So we are looking at a high school chemistry task. And this is, you're using 11-12 standards for literacy, but you have multiple grade levels in chemistry, right, Anna?
Yeah, I have mainly 11th grade. I do have some sophomores, but they're advanced sophomores and very few seniors.
Okay, great. That context is very helpful. And we are looking at template IE8, which is our hypothesis experiment template, which we don't use all that much. So I'm excited to dig into this tonight. And here's the task. After researching informational texts on the development and testing of gas laws, developing a hypothesis, and conducting an experiment examining gas laws, write a laboratory report in which you explain your procedures and results and confirm or reject your hypothesis. Include charts, tables, and any calculations to help convey your message to your readers. All right, so Anna, tell us a little bit, what are you hoping that students will get out of this task?
So part of the thing that we do in chemistry is we do a lot of labs, and last year I did many cookbook labs where they just followed the procedures and then analyzed results from those procedures. And I'm really trying to get them to think on their own. So from this task, I want them to take gas laws, which they don't really get to see, and put them into effect. So, I mean, it wouldn't technically be such a difficult experiment, but it's the thinking process behind all the gas laws. So I just want them to make legitimate procedures to test those gas laws out. That's really the main basis of it. And then write me a formal lab report. I actually asked them at the beginning of the year how many of them have written formal lab reports, and I have, out of 150 students, about 5 of them.
Wow. Okay.
So,
Don't tell me that.
yeah, I know, isn't that stressful?
Oh, that hurts my soul.
Me too.
All right. Well, that's why we're doing this work. Awesome. Okay. Thank you for that context, Anna. That's really, really helpful. So now let's ask Anna to kind of sit back and relax for a minute. And Sonia, Seth, and we will talk a little bit about what we noticed. So in particular, we're going to start with the focus standards. So we have a science content standard here, interpret the behavior of ideal gases in terms of kinetic molecular theory. We have our RST-9, which is to synthesize information from a range of sources, including experiments, into a coherent understanding of a process, etc. And our informational writing standard. So let's start there. Sonia and Seth, what do you notice or wonder when you look at the alignment between the focus standards and the task prompt?
Well, I noticed that the writing standard, it fits perfectly with what she's asking, because she's asking them to write scientific procedures. They're writing out an experiment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then I was noticing the reading standard, synthesize information from a range of sources into a coherent understanding of a process or concept. So I'm noticing that second part of the reading standard, resolving conflicting information when possible. So you know, kind of just as I look at it, I wonder if the focus is more on the first part of that, and or will resolving conflicting information come up. You know, haven't looked at the text yet, but so I'd also wonder, like it says after researching informational texts. So I'm wondering if there is a range of sources, you know, meaning text, experiments, simulations, etc. within those documents, but I haven't opened up the text yet.
So that's an interesting question. Why don't we explore that a little bit? And Anna, you can tell us a little bit more about what you're thinking here. So I think the question Seth is raising is around, you know, will that piece of the reading standard that is resolving conflicting information, will that be relevant here? And as well as the range of sources. And so the answer to that is kind of in the relationship between the task and the text themselves, right? Like, do the texts provide that opportunity? So I noticed that your texts, you say, are not set in stone yet, Anna. What are you thinking with regard to what kind of text would be the most useful and appropriate here?
So I have, let me go to my screen here. So I have a case study where they actually studied the Patriots and Deflategate, and I don't know if I want to use that quite yet, just because it does go with the deflating of the footballs with the Patriots team, and seeing if the gas laws actually coincide with that. And I don't know if it's as relevant to the ideal gas law as it should be. I just liked it because of the Patriots. So the case study with the bends is for divers. And so that could be relevant because they could pull information from that, and they could actually use an experiment where they're doing kind of like a scuba diving simulation in class and see how gas laws relate to that. And if there's anything conflicting, because in that case study, if I remember correctly, it's been a while, it actually talks about like the discrepancy between raising or coming out of the water too quickly in comparison to the gas laws.
Mm-hmm.
I have to kind of dive more into that. And then the historical gas laws PDF just goes into a history of how these gas laws even came to be. So I kind of want to just find more experiments that have been done that they can kind of pull information from, and maybe even conflicting experiments. I just haven't had a chance to.
Okay. That's really helpful to know. So it sounds like what you're wanting them to do is a lot of inference from existing examples of gas laws sort of being tested against real life cases. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, I find the more they can relate to real life, the more fun they have. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I really want to use that Deflategate one, but I'm not sure if it's even possible. I just have to look into it more.
I mean, that makes sense. I just don't know enough about the content standards. So maybe you and Sonia can talk to me a little bit more about that content standard so I can see the relationship to the task.
I think the diving one is perfect. I mean, that one, you know, the kids are going to have to probably get some background information on that though, because I'm sure a lot of them haven't been diving.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the diving one, that makes total sense. And you're right, the deflating case, I'm not sure. I can't remember. I know they deflated the football, but how that, you know.
Yeah, in this particular case study, it goes through different sources of how like temperature can affect the pressure and the temperature or the volume of the gas in the ball, and so how that relates necessarily to ideal gas laws,
Right.
I'm not sure, but I know that the scuba diving one could be really good
Yeah.
if I find because I know more experiments have been done on that.
Right.
In relation to scuba diving as opposed to a football. And they might be too wrapped up in football to even.
Yeah, and their opinion on it, right?
Right.
You know, they might have really strong opinions on
The
that.
Patriots.
And that's such an important thing to consider because, you know, we're always looking for engagement and real world application that will kind of get kids hooked into the subject. But ultimately the goal is that content understanding. And sometimes if something is too much of like a current or a hot button issue, it's distracting. Like you said, Sonia, they get caught up in their opinion as opposed to the actual analysis that we want them to do. So that can be a red flag sometimes.
Yes.
Right.
So it sounds like you've got, you know, a little more thinking to do about which texts will accomplish what you want them to, but you have a pretty clear path for what kind of texts you want. As I'm looking at this, I'm wondering, and again, this is like a genuine question because this is not my content area of expertise. When I think about what I see in the task and the content standard, I'm wondering about the kinetic molecular theory part of the standard and how that's taken up in the task. Because I don't see that language. That doesn't mean it's not there because I might just not know. Like, oh, that's the same thing as gas laws.
Right.
I don't know. But talk to me a little bit about that.
So basically, kinetic molecular theory is the movement of particles. And when it talks about ideal gas laws are not typically found in nature simply because those particles don't move the way that an ideal gas would. So in relation to kinetic molecular theory, it's more so how do they relate? If I put it in a smaller container, what's going to happen to my ideal gas? And what's going to happen if I put it in a larger container? So that's where I'm kind of struggling with text finding. So it relates. I would just have to put it into the task and I'd have to find the text that correlate. So that's kind of where I'm struggling.
Okay. All right. So I think what might be helpful to do now is to, you know, and this is not what I advise in the real world outside of a 15-minute task workshop, because I would say really work on finding the right texts first and then kind of shape your task to that. Since we're in a limited time and we want to make the most use of this collaboration, let's assume that the texts exist and think about in the prompt itself, how can we really refine to the clarity of what you're asking for, making sure the connection to kinetic molecular theory is there. Because I think, you know, it sounds like from the conversation, there's general agreement that the kind of the overall thrust of the reading and writing standards makes a lot of sense. The topic of the content standard is really here. So I think this is in a refinement stage where it's really about massaging the language of the prompt to make sure that it's super clear and really asks for everything you are looking for.
Yeah, and I actually, right before we had this meeting, I changed the template because I didn't like the original template, but I don't even think I had that language in there. So
What template were you using before? Do you remember? And I'm going to make a snapshot for you right now, actually, so that if we change anything, you don't lose this version.
I don't know. I don't remember. I don't think it was this one though.
Okay.
Um,
Well, the reason I was just clicking on the task template just now is that this is a less familiar task template for most people, and I wanted to point out how much of it is hardwired.
Yeah, I can see that. I'm looking at the collection now.
Yeah. The
Yep.
hypothesis experiment template is mostly hardwired language. There's actually
Mhm.
limited
Right.
opportunities to put in your language. And so, because it's really about like making sure that includes the hypothesis, the experiment, explaining, confirming, rejecting. That piece of it was so important to have hardwired into this that it leaves a little bit less room for your language, I think. And so it's about thinking about how we can maximize this template, or maybe use additional demands to our advantage to make sure that we're asking for everything we want. But I really wanted everyone to see, your kind of how few blanks there are in this one, or how much more there is of the template language in comparison to most of the task templates.
Yeah, I think actually now that I said that, I think I ended up landing on the same template.
Okay.
So that was my mistake.
I mean, just outsider's perspective, it seems like pretty solid. I mean, as long as, like we said, text, the issue of the text, but really when she writes, development and testing of gas laws, and then examining gas laws, it's just really that's where the rubber will meet the road in terms of, is that a kind of the way we want to go from that heavy hitter content standard? And if so, then pretty solid.
Do you need to put in there in terms of kinetic molecular theory? Like when you're saying developing and testing of gas laws, do you need to put that in terms of, like Nicole was saying, does that need to be in there to show that you're going to do part of that?
So in other words, informational text on the development and testing of gas laws.
In terms of kinetic molecular theory.
Or would that part be after, and conducting an experiment, examining gas laws in terms of kinetic molecular theory? Or is that, I'm with Sonia, I'm just still
I'm just asking, I don't know.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure what the exact right wording would be, but I do think if it were going to go anywhere in the template, it would go here, which is the content
Yeah,
blank.
that's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Or in an additional demand where you have the opportunity to have like explain how blank and blank are connected.
I would probably actually do the additional demand.
Okay.
What might fit in that additional demand?
Explain how.
There's so much here. I'm gonna like remove that. Don't do this to me now. Core tool.
Is there a demand that says explain but not explain how blank and blank? Or does it?
There's connect blank and blank in your response, and there's explain how blank and blank are connected or related, or you could put in a slightly different verb there.
Yeah. Because it'd almost be like explain how kinetic molecular theory and it'd almost be like their steps are related to the gas laws. Explain how kinetic molecular theory
and you can say are related to something, or you can just say related as in like to each other. So if there are two things that you want them to connect or relate that could go in those two blanks, I don't know, would it be the behavior of the gas in their experiment and kinetic molecular theory? Are those the two things?
Yeah. Yeah, after researching.
And how the behavior of the gas in your experiment.
Explain how the behavior of the gas in your experiment can. Yeah.
I'm just pulling that behavior piece from the, because they're gonna actually be able to do something with the ideal gas in the experiment.
Yeah, I mean, and gases are just really hard to work with in general, but
Yeah, I bet.
I can make it work. I've made crazier things work.
I believe in you. How is that feeling to you now, Anna?
A lot better than it was when I was looking at it earlier.
Well, we didn't do much. I mean, to be fair, you really had this really pretty tight already.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think I haven't read the Deflategate piece, but like Sonia was saying, it seems like with the historical gas laws piece and then the case study of the Benz piece, maybe there's one other thing.
Yeah, I think I kind of want to find something, maybe another experiment done.
Yeah.
In relation to scuba diving and the gas laws, and take Deflategate out, and that'll just be my own personal fun.
Because I could see, I mean, that to me that would represent a range of sources, because you kind of have just a regular, a text with several components within the historical gas laws piece,
Mm-hmm.
and then the actual case study.
Yeah. Although here, what's interesting about this kind of task is that the students' own experiments become a source.
Oh yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, it's a neat thing because they're generating data or insights or whatever, and that becomes sort of a text that they are using, a source that they are using to synthesize and develop that coherent understanding. So they themselves are creating a part of that range of sources.
That's so cool. I didn't even realize that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
I mean, I think the key there is and I'm just trying, I think it's not getting hung up on what kinds of sources, but that's awesome to pull. I think mainly if they're truly going to synthesize information from several different sources, I think, we're looking at some original student thinking that's going to have to surface, which I think would be really strong.
Definitely.
Yeah.
They are 11th into 12th grade,
Yeah.
Kick those brains into gear.
I think it's great. It would be amazing. I walked into a science classroom last week and I thought, if the teacher would have just handed the supplies out and had them actually build their own lab, this would have, the rigor would have gone up. Just amazing. So yeah, this is really good. I like it.
Thanks, Sonia.
All right. Well, thank you, Anna. I'm excited about this module. Are you planning on implementing this year?
I want to, and change it out for the one that I did for demo day. But we'll see.
No more stoichiometry.
I mean, Alec really liked that one because he liked it as opposed to the test, so we might keep it. But I just have to see if I can work it in.
Yeah. Okay. Very cool. All right. Well, let us know if you need anything as you're looking for texts. And I think this is going in a really exciting direction.
Yeah, thanks.
All right. Sonia, you are up.
Okay.
So we are going to transition now to middle school. And
Yes, we are.
So I know that you are, you work with a range of grade levels. So it looks to me like you've picked the 6th grade standards. Is that right?
Yes, it is a 6th grade standard. Yep.
Perfect. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to read the task out loud, and then I'm going to ask you to share a little bit about your purpose and your thinking behind the task, and we'll go from there. So we're looking at an argumentative task this time in template A9 for 6th grade science. And here we go. After researching informational texts on the interaction of Earth's spheres in order to sustain life on Earth and the effect they have on weather and climate, and completing an inquiry lab on weather and climate, write a scientific article in which you discuss how the geosphere, hydrosphere, cryosphere, atmosphere, and biosphere interact to sustain life on Earth, and evaluate how these interactions of the spheres influence local weather and climate. Support your position with evidence from your research using data analysis and results. Include data tables and/or graphs to convey your message to your readers. Include references. Support your position with evidence from the texts. All right. So we're looking at a content standard about the interactions among spheres. And we have a reading standard about tracing and evaluating arguments, and our informational explanatory text writing standard. So before we get into that, Sonia, share with us a little bit about what you were hoping to accomplish with this task.
So basically, I was trying to take that Earth standard from 6th grade, which is an annually assessed standard, and there's a bunch of standards that are underneath it. And I wanted to make a task that was challenging for them, where they would have to do research, they would have to do a lab, they would have to figure out, you know, basically how things interact. And that's it, really.
Okay.
I just want it to be definitely higher order, where they actually have to think for themselves and do a lot of it.
Okay. So you're really aiming for rigor here.
Yes.
Love it. All right. So let's start then, Anna and Seth and me. Let's start with the standards. As you look at this task and you look at the standards that are identified in the focus cluster, what do you notice or wonder about the alignment?
So, I mean, one of the things I noticed was that the writing standard talks about writing informative explanatory text to examine a topic and convey ideas and concepts. And the task template kind of guides towards argumentation. So I'm wondering if maybe, you know, if that's just a question for Sonia, is, you know, do you really want to go the argumentative route with that task, in which case maybe it's W1.1 as a writing standard, or do you really, you know, want to go that informative explanatory route where they're explaining and examining a topic, in which case maybe it's just a switch out of the template without much difficulty. But that's just, you know, one of the things that jumps out at me.
Yeah, I struggled with the template, trying to figure out which one. So yeah, I mean, I'm definitely, if you think it should be in, you know, the explanatory.
Kind of goes back to what Nicole is saying, like really kind of focus on what's the real goal, because really it probably could go either way depending on how you craft it. You know, it could be, what were you thinking, Anna?
I was actually thinking just along the same lines as you, Seth, that that jumped out at me about informative and explanatory. But by reading Sonia's task, I feel like she wants it to be an explanatory as opposed to an argument, because you're not really being like, hey, which sphere is the best sphere?
Right.
All together into one, and how it influences weather and climate.
Yeah.
Which kind of goes back to, you know, the authentic product, which seems really cool, like a scientific article, which I don't know, I haven't read enough scientific articles, you know, other than like Scientific American or something, but they seem to be more explanatory, or you know, analyzing or examining something, as opposed to, I mean, everything's an argument, yes, but maybe this is a Nicole question. You know, the run-of-the-mill scientific article, is it more of a explanatory thing, or I don't know?
Yeah, so I think that as I look at that, and I noticed that discrepancy too, it's always really important to make sure that the writing mode in your standards and the writing mode in your template line up. I always say, Seth has probably heard me say this a million times, that this particular template A9 to me is like the bridge between the two modes. It's like a little bit of both, because it's that discuss and evaluate.
Yep.
And so I
Good
think
point.
based on that, based on what I'm hearing from everybody, informational explanatory seems like the better direction to go here.
Okay.
And so the next question is, you know, what template will really allow you to do what you want to do? Because one thing I notice is that there's a lot in the prompt, right? Just from a volume perspective, there's several different things going on. And
Yeah.
so I think we want to think about what's the best template to contain that. And then also from there, how can we best sort of streamline the prompt to keep it at just that right level of detail so that it's super clear and doesn't become overwhelming for students, right?
Can I ask a question also? Because I see that she wants an inquiry lab as well. Is it more so that you want them to perform a lab so they can see like differences in weather and climate, or do you want them to research everything and find information and then write what did you have, a scientific article on it? Because
Right.
there's different avenues that you can take, and both would have equal level of rigor. Just depends.
Yeah, so basically, and I don't know if this is too much, but what I was thinking is, so they were doing the research on the Earth's spheres, the interaction of the Earth's spheres, but they were going to do an inquiry lab on the weather and climate. And then after that, that's when they write the article, because then it's all clear to them how it all interacts. But I don't know if that's too much to do in one task. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. It's a lot. I don't know that it's inherently too much. So we just need to kind of think through what that looks like and whether it makes sense to bring them together. What kind of inquiry lab did you have in mind? And this is, again, really just an inquisitive question for me to understand more, to try to figure out the answer to that question. What kind of lab did you have in mind? What sort of things might they do?
So there's a lab about you use different beads, different color beads. And I'm sorry, I didn't attach anything yet.
That's okay.
I would have to rewrite it in order for it to be an inquiry lab, because right now it's just a, you know, this is what you do, A, B, C, D, and I want them to figure it out a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
But basically you figure out that, you know, the patterns that you see over months and months would be what you call the climate. And then the weather is just the day-to-day. So it has to do with like picking certain color beads, and they have to do some calculations on it.
And how long does that lab last?
It's just a one-day lab.
One-day lab. Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. So it sounds like that should be manageable within the scope of this, that it's, you know, it's one key piece of learning that supplements what they're doing with text in the research. So let's play with keeping it in and see if we can make it work. The other thing I noticed, and we might not address this right away as we think about the template and the prompt, but I just want to put it out there, is really thinking about the reading standard as well, also in terms of kind of the mode, because this reading standard really asks students to evaluate arguments. And again, in this case, it seems likely that the texts they're going to read are more likely to be informational in nature than argumentative. Do you agree with that? I know we don't have specific text attached yet, but thinking about the kinds of text they would encounter.
Right. Yes.
Okay. So let's put a flag on that to revisit in terms of which reading standard might be the best fit. But let's think about template for a minute. So I took a snapshot, and that way we won't lose the current version. I'm also going to copy, doesn't like to do it when it's in edit mode, copy and paste this version of the prompt just so that we have it even more handy.
Okay.
Let's look at those templates. Okay, so we decided we wanted to look in the informational explanatory territory, but we're not sure which cognitive demand we might use.
That's what I was gonna recommend, was filter by cognitive demand, because that's another way Sonia can really hone in on what kind of thinking she wants hardwired into the task.
Exactly. So as you look at these, Sonia, I know it doesn't show the whole prompt or template, but it gives you a sense of the cognitive demand, the verb that's going to be at the center of the template. Does anything stand out to you as potentially a good fit? And this can be for the whole group to answer.
Let's see. I would say analysis and explanation are the two that are kind of,
Those kind of jumped out at me too. After what-
Investigation jumped out at me, but I don't know if that's a template for that.
The investigation one actually doesn't have an informational explanatory version.
Oh.
So the good thing is for analysis and explanation, those two templates have the exact same structure. It's just a different verb, analyze versus explain. So we can play with one and it would pretty much transfer directly over if we decided to go to the other one. So let's try analysis and see what we get. Okay, so that brings us into the informational explanatory mode. And we did lose, it doesn't copy over all your additional demands, which is why I wanted to copy that whole version of the prompt so we can pull them back in.
mm-hmm.
But in thinking about what you've described, our task is sort of to figure out what goes in the blank after analyze, right? And I like starting at the center of the prompt there with that content blank and then working outwards to the other pieces in terms of the beginning and the end of the prompt. But this is really the meat of what we would want students to do with this content. So let's see if we can figure out a way to state within this one blank what you want students to analyze.
Okay, so write a scientific article in which you analyze how all those spheres interact to sustain life on Earth and the effect they have on climate and weather.
Okay. So let me ask you a question. How important to you is this piece to sustain life on Earth?
Yeah, it's not. We can get rid of that.
Okay.
Let's see. Write a scientific article in which you analyze how the geosphere, hydrosphere, cryosphere, atmosphere, and biosphere interact and the effect they have on climate and weather.
I mean, that sounds a lot like what you described in your opening
Mm-hmm.
about what you were looking for.
Yeah, it is. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
with that, just a question is like, so the first part of that content standard around like differentiating between the, among the spheres, it's almost like by analyzing how they interact and effect they have on climate and weather. I'm wondering if like sort of that ability to differentiate between the spheres is almost like embedded in that or implied. Like, does she need to call that part of it out so that we include that thinking skill of differentiating between the spheres as well as how they interact?
That's a great question. To me, when you bring in the word analyze, it's implied that it includes that differentiate, right? Because analyzing is thinking about the different pieces and then how they work together.
Yeah, makes
but
sense.
I would suggest that we don't assume that students will do it automatically, right? And so while in the task, we can think of it as really wrapped up in what we mean by analyze, it would probably be important in the instructional ladder to make sure that that's called out for students so you can really see evidence of them doing that differentiation piece.
Okay.
And we're not going to be working on the instructional ladder for this offering, but we will later.
Yeah.
So something to keep in mind.
Okay.
Yeah. So from there, I think that, when you look at after your opening blanks, and I'm just going to kind of move some words into the right place for you.
Okay.
Because that's where you're going to want to put the word researching.
Mm-hmm.
And then here's where you put what they research. I think you could really pare this back.
Yeah.
I think you could really pare it back since you're using the verb researching to the topic. I mean, it could really be as simple as after researching Earth spheres and weather and climate, or something like that, where it's really just calling out the topic.
Yeah.
I see you nodding, Anna. What do you think?
No, I agree. I feel like it could even read as like after researching, just like you said, informational text on Earth spheres and weather and climate, or the informational text on the effect Earth spheres have on weather and climate, and completing an inquiry lab. Write a scientific article and how those spheres interact.
So actually, that raises an important question. Are the informational texts about Earth spheres, or are they about the effect of Earth spheres on weather and climate?
It's going to be both. I was going to have some on the Earth spheres, some on how they affect weather and climate.
Okay. So it'll just be really important to ensure that they don't like give the answer away, basically. You know what I mean? In thinking
Right.
about how they address that there's still an opening for students to have to make that connection themselves. But even so, I think for the purposes of the prompt, we can just stick with the topics. I'm going to really strip it back. Again, you know that you have your original version in there, so if you want to go back and add more detail, you can. But just for the sake of argument, I'm going to try to cut words wherever I can. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. All right. So now you've got a core of a task here, and we haven't gotten yet to the different additional demands that you had. So that'll be something to consider, is getting these, these other pieces that you want, to the references, the data tables, those specifics, to get those back into the prompt.
Right.
And I'm not sure, I think that the way you had it structured before, you might have been adding those here in the central blank.
I did.
I'd say that you could have a lot of fun playing with additional demands here.
Right.
As you're going to your next draft, and just see like which ones fit and figure out how you want to kind of tag those on to your prompt.
Okay. All right.
All right.
That's perfect.
Awesome. So I have lost track of time a little bit. This is my downfall. We need to go back to the group. So thank you so much, Anna and Sonia, for sharing your tasks and sharing your feedback and thinking with one another. I look forward to doing one-on-ones on these and really getting them ready to go. I'm going to go ahead and close our breakout room and send us back to the big group.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, ladies.
Okay, hold on. I got to do it for everybody. Close all rooms. Okay. Based on the fact that they haven't come back yet, they were also still going. So
I was like, wait a second, nothing happened.
We're all still here.
they'll get yanked back in at the end of the 60 seconds if they don't voluntarily.
So what was interesting about that little workshop is, I pulled up the task pitfall list just real quickly, and it's one of those things. It's like definitely the one-on-one workshops would be helpful, because they're really, a task might be wordy, but not really, there's not really a pitfall for just wordiness. You know what I mean? You really got to through it and make sure that. So anyways, good stuff.
I have to say that was the first time in my life I've ever been wordy. Someone told me normally I'm so fact-based. That's funny.
That is funny. Well, you know what? I find more often than not, science tasks have the most words in them, and it's because they have to be really precise and specific. Like, they're asking for really specific things, and they need to include all of those things. So it's not uncommon at all. But you can have a lot of words and still be clear. It's just about getting the clarity.
Right.
Yeah, that was my biggest thing, Sonia, last year, was I put so many words in.
Yeah.
And they were like, you need to, make it to where there's multiple answers. I was like, but that's how it works. So I understand.
All right, welcome back, everybody. I
Yay.
gather from the fact that you all didn't come back right away that you were still having some conversations in your room. So that's awesome. I'm going to kind of break structure a little bit, and I would just love to hear from everybody about what were some interesting or powerful things that came up in your conversations.
Well, I think for me, probably one of the powerful things was choosing a different task template, because I thought that's the way I wanted to go, but then after you all reading my task, it was like, oh no, wait, I don't want that. I want just, the explanatory. So I think that was really good.
Well, I'm from that same group, but I was just going to say that it came up in, I like when Nicole pointed out that she kind of builds a task from after the verb from the task template. And then instead of starting from the top and working through like after reading, but starting with in which you analyze and really hone in on that part of it, the guts of what we're trying to ask students to think through. So that was a good tip for me.
I think what was powerful for my task was all the questioning that was provided by, that opportunity with collaboration. I think just having, and I don't know if they were like sincerely wondering or if you were just using coaching language, which was perfectly fine, because like just kind of using, like asking questions, like why and why did you do this? And it really kind of helps you make sure that you have it straight in your head, like what you're looking for, what you're asking, and that it's coming through clear in the task and activity that you want the students to do. So
for me, one of the things that we talked about was choosing a text that may not doesn't go with like everything that you want to do, because I had that was very me based and it's a very hot topic right now, and that would take away from their writing piece. So to kind of scale back and get a text that will actually have them critically think, as opposed to just putting too much of their own opinion, especially in science. So that was what stood out to me.
Yeah, sometimes going for engaging can be a double-edged sword, right? Like if you get too engaging, sometimes it's distracting as opposed to an entry point into the rich content that you want them to get. Very cool. All right. Well, thanks everybody for another night of sharing and collaborating. We mentioned several times earlier that the next key step in the development of your task is to sign up for a one-on-one workshop. And so you'll be able to do that during the month of October. And David and Norris and I are offering, various times within that month where you can sign up. And, we'll get in Zoom. It'll be just you and whichever facilitator you sign up for to really hone in on those final decisions, clean everything up, and try to get your task as close to a final draft as possible. And in those, when you have 45 minutes to really focus, you can get a lot done. So those are really powerful. I'm going to share the link to the sign up sheet now. And you don't have to sign up this second, although you can if you want to. But you want to make sure, we are all aiming to submit your tasks by November 1st. So we will wrap up here in early October, and then we'll have an in-person day on October 17th, which won't be focused on these tasks, but will be a chance to see each other and work together. And then you'll still have a couple of weeks after that to kind of finalize everything and clean it up before you submit. If you're ready to submit sooner, you certainly can. The event will be open all month, but you have until November 1st to do that thinking. So in the sign-up sheet, you can see that there are just days and times and a facilitator's name. And you just, pick the slot that you want and put your name in there. And then whoever you signed up with will send you a direct calendar invitation with a Zoom link to meet at that time. And we tried to put in, kind of a variety of times, some that are after school, and as well as some that are during the day, if you're in a position where you can do that, or if it coincides with your planning period. So we tried to provide a variety, but if you can't find a time that will work for you on the ones offered here, please just reach out to us and we can make something work, because we want to make sure everyone has the opportunity to do that one-on-one. Any questions right now about signing up for one-on-ones or looking ahead to submitting your task for national peer review, which we will talk more about in our last 2 sessions. But any burning questions at the moment? Okay, so, oh, go ahead, Amanda.
I was just gonna ask, did you say that the in-person's on the 17th of
Yes.
October? Okay,
I think so.
Okay, if I have an AP thing I have to go to, is there, would I be able to sign up for like 2 like one-on-ones or something like that for that? Because they already signed me up for that. I have to go to Boca Ciega.
They keep stealing you from us for these days together. Dang it.
I was just thinking that. I'm like,
We want Amanda.
Yeah, no, I'm wearing different hats this year.
Yeah. Let's talk about that, because the in-person day will be focused on not on this, but on the instructional cycles with the tasks that were designed last year, you know, like what we did in the summer kickoff. So there may be something else that we can do,
Okay.
but it won't be relevant to the task you're designing for this virtual course.
Okay, cool.
that's the day where we mainly want to bring back all the teachers who taught first quarter modules, bring back student work, really dig in with that, then start looking at quarter 2. So hopefully, Amanda, you'll have some other 9th and 10th grade teachers representing Eastridge High. And then, you know, I mean, Anna could just coach them all on ELA. So we're
There
good.
you go, Anna.
Could we sign up for more than one slot? Sorry. Can we sign up for more than one or just?
If you feel
One.
so moved to do so, I will not say
Okay.
no.
Okay.
Yeah. Or like if we get to the end of our one-on-one and you're like, can we get back together for 20 minutes once I've had a chance to think about this, we can also definitely do that to like really confirm everything.
And you
Okay,
said it was like
thank you.
45 minutes?
Mhm.
Okay, because I snatched you up during my planning.
Okay. Perfect.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, y'all. As you're going through your asynchronous work, at this point, there really isn't any more completing of action items in the instructional cycle courses. There are still some things that you're asked to like look at there just to become familiar with the content, but you're not really doing action items in the course. It's all about your task at this point. So as we move through these last 2 weeks, you're applying the thinking that we've done here together. You know, you're always welcome to reach out to the thinking partner that you did Pitfall checks with to get their eyes on it now that you've revised, or whatever feels most useful to you in addition to these workshops. But that's going to be our focus. We only have 2 more weeks together in this offering, but then we'll be back together again to think about skills and instruction in the new year. So never fear. But we're gonna wrap it up now. It's about our ending time. So I see people in there signing up, and as always, we will do our final word whip. So as you're leaving tonight, a word or phrase, something in the chat that's resonating with you from our work together tonight. And then we'll stick around for a few minutes if anybody has individual questions.
Mhm.
All right. Thank you all so much. We will see you next week. Have a great rest of the week.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, good night.